This is a CBS News special report. The President's Plan. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. In a few moments, President Ronald Reagan will speak to the nation. His address will be about his secret weapons for Iran policy and what role he played in that arms for hostages deal. In recent weeks, Mr. Reagan has come under pressure from friends and opponents alike to apologize to the nation for a policy that went wrong and was counter to his own publicly stated policy. For that and other reasons, this will not be an easy speech for Ronald Reagan to make. The White House went to some lengths today to say that it is one that Mr. Reagan will make with determination. Tonight's address comes about a week after release of the Tower Commission report. President Reagan said he needed the time to consider that report and his response. Now, live from the Oval Office at the White House, President Reagan.
My fellow Americans, I've spoken to you from this historic office on many occasions and about many things. The power of the presidency is often thought to reside within this Oval Office. Yet it doesn't rest here. It rests in you, the American people, and in your trust. Your trust is what gives a president his powers of leadership and his personal strength. And it's what I want to talk to you about this evening. For the past 3 months, I've been silent on the revelations about Iran. And you must have been thinking, well, why doesn't he tell us what's happening? Why doesn't he just speak to us as he has in the past when we've faced troubles or tragedies? Others of you, I guess, were thinking, what's he doing hiding out in the White House? Well, the reason I haven't spoken to you before now is this. You deserve the truth. And as frustrating as the waiting has been, I felt it was improper to come to you with sketchy reports or possibly even erroneous statements, which would then have to be corrected, creating even more doubt and confusion. There's been enough of that. I paid a price for my silence in terms of your trust and confidence, but I've had to wait, as you have, for the complete story. That's why I appointed Ambassador David Abshire as my special counselor to help get out the thousands of documents to the various investigations. And I appointed a special review board, the Tower Board, which took on the chore of pulling the truth together for me and getting to the bottom of things. It has now issued its findings. I'm often accused of being an optimist, and it's true. I had to hunt pretty hard to find any good news in the board's report. As you know, it's well stocked with criticisms, which I'll discuss in a moment, but I was very relieved to read this sentence. The board is convinced that the president does indeed want the full story to be told. And that will continue to be my pledge to you as the other investigations go forward. I want to thank the members of the panel, former Senator John Tower, former Secretary of State Edmund Muskie, and former National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft. They have done the nation, as well as me personally, a great service by submitting a report of such integrity and depth. They have my genuine and enduring gratitude. I've studied the board's report. Its findings are honest, convincing, and highly critical, and I accept them. And tonight, I want to share with you my thoughts on these findings and report to you on the actions I'm taking to implement the board's recommendations. First, let me say I take full responsibility for my own actions and for those of my administration. As angry as I may be about activities undertaken without my knowledge, I am still accountable for those activities. As disappointed as I may be in some who served me, I am still the one who must answer to the American people for this behavior. And as personally distasteful as I find secret bank accounts and diverted funds, well, as the Navy would say, this happened on my watch. Let's start with the part that is the most controversial. A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true. But the facts and the evidence tell me it is not. As the Tower Board reported, what began as a strategic opening to Iran deteriorated in its implementation into trading arms for hostages. This runs counter to my own beliefs, to administration policy, and to the original strategy we had in mind. There are reasons why it happened, but no excuses. It was a mistake. I undertook the original Iran initiative in order to develop relations with those who might assume leadership in a post-Khomeini government. It's clear from the board's report, however, that I let my personal concern for the hostages spill over into the geopolitical strategy of reaching out to Iran. I asked so many questions about the hostages' welfare that I didn't ask enough about the specifics of the total Iran plan. Let me say to the hostage families, we have not given up. We never will. And I promise you we'll use every legitimate means to free your loved ones from captivity. But I must also caution that those Americans who freely remain in such dangerous areas must know that they're responsible for their own safety. Now, another major aspect of the board's findings regards the transfer of funds to the Nicaraguan Contras. The Tower Board wasn't able to find out what happened to this money. So the facts here will be left to the continuing investigations of the court-appointed independent counsel and the 2 congressional investigating committees. I'm confident the truth will come out about this matter as well. As I told the Tower Board, I didn't know about any diversion of funds to the Contras, but as president, I cannot escape responsibility. Much has been said about my management style, a style that's worked successfully for me during 8 years as governor of California and for most of my presidency. The way I work is to identify the problem, find the right individuals to do the job, and then let them go to it. I've found this invariably brings out the best in people. They seem to rise to their full capability, and in the long run, you get more done. When it came to managing the NSC staff, let's face it, my style didn't match its previous track record. I've already begun correcting this. As a start, yesterday I met with the entire professional staff of the National Security Council. I defined for them the values I want to guide the national security policies of this country. I told them that I wanted a policy that was as justifiable and understandable in public as it was in secret. I wanted a policy that reflected the will of the Congress as well as of the White House. And I told them that there will be no more freelancing by individuals when it comes to our national security. You heard a lot about the staff of the National Security Council in recent months. Well, I can tell you they are good and dedicated government employees who put in long hours for the nation's benefit. They are eager and anxious to serve their country. One thing still upsetting me, however, is that no one kept proper records of meetings or decisions. This led to my failure to recollect whether I approved an arms shipment before or after the fact. I did approve it. I just can't say specifically when. Well, rest assured, there's plenty of record keeping now going on at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. For nearly a week now, I've been studying the board's report. I want the American people to know that this wrenching ordeal of recent months has not been in vain. I endorse every one of the Tower Board's recommendations. In fact, I'm going beyond its recommendations so as to put the House in even better order. I'm taking action in 3 basic areas: personnel, national security policy, and the process for making sure that the system works. First, personnel. I've brought in an accomplished and highly respected new team here at the White House. They bring new blood, new energy, and new credibility and experience. Former Senator Howard Baker, my new chief of staff, possesses a breadth of legislative and foreign affairs skills that's impossible to match. I'm hopeful that his experience as minority and majority leader of the Senate can help us forge a new partnership with the Congress, especially on foreign and national security policies. I'm genuinely honored that he's given up his own presidential aspirations to serve the country as my chief of staff. Frank Carlucci, my new national security advisor, is respected for his experience in government and trusted for his judgment and counsel. Under him, the NSC staff is being rebuilt with proper management discipline. Already, almost half the NSC professional staff is comprised of new people. Yesterday, I nominated William Webster, a man of sterling reputation, to be director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Mr. Webster has served as director of the FBI and as a U.S. District Court judge. He understands the meaning of rule of law. So that his knowledge of national security matters can be available to me on a continuing basis, I will also appoint John Tower to serve as a member of my Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. I am considering other changes in personnel, and I'll move more furniture as I see fit in the weeks and months ahead. Second, in the area of national security policy, I have ordered the NSC to begin a comprehensive review of all covert operations. I have also directed that any covert activity be in support of clear policy objectives and in compliance with American values. I expect a covert policy that if Americans saw it on the front page of their newspaper, they'd say, that makes sense. I have had issued a directive prohibiting the NSC staff itself from undertaking covert operations. No ifs, ands, or buts. I have asked Vice President Bush to reconvene his task force on terrorism to review our terrorist policy in light of the events that have occurred. Third, in terms of the process of reaching national security decisions, I am adopting in total the Tower Report's model of how the NSC process and staff should work. I am directing Mr. Carlucci to take the necessary steps to make that happen. He will report back to me on further reforms that might be needed. I've created the post of NSC legal advisor to assure a greater sensitivity to matters of law. I am also determined to make the congressional oversight process work. Proper procedures for consultation with the Congress will be followed not only in letter, but in spirit. Before the end of March, I will report to the Congress on all the steps I've taken in line with the Tower Board's conclusions. Now, what should happen when you make a mistake is this. You take your knocks, you learn your lessons, and then you move on. That's the healthiest way to deal with a problem. This in no way diminishes the importance of the other continuing investigations, but the business of our country and our people must proceed. I've gotten this message from Republicans and Democrats in Congress, from allies around the world, and if we're reading the signals right, even from the Soviets. And of course, I've heard the message from you, the American people. You know, by the time you reach my age, you've made plenty of mistakes. And if you've lived your life properly, so you learn. You put things in perspective. You pull your energies together, you change, you go forward. My fellow Americans, I have a great deal that I want to accomplish with you and for you over the next 2 years. And the Lord willing, that's exactly what I intend to do. Good night, and God bless you.
President Reagan speaking tonight from the Oval Office at the White House. For those of you who may have tuned in late or been distracted, the President responded to the Tower Commission report. Mr. Reagan, speaking about his arms for hostages deal with Iran, basically said, my policy went wrong, my White House team made mistakes, and he said he made some mistakes. The President did not apologize outright for the policy or what he had done. Mr. Reagan said he found little good news in the Tower report. He acknowledged that his silence on the whole Iran-Contra money affair has cost him public trust and confidence. Mr. Reagan said he hoped to open new channels to a post-Khomeini government in Iran by supplying the Ayatollah's government with weapons, but in the end, he said his overtures turned into an arms for hostages swap. He didn't explain why that happened. He didn't say where the money actually had gone. He said some things took place without his knowledge, including the diversion of money to the Contras, if that's where the money went. But Mr. Reagan said, and I quote now, I take full responsibility for my own actions and for those of my administration. And he said near the end, you take your knocks, you learn your lessons, and then you move on. We move on now to Bill Plant, our veteran White House correspondent who is at the White House. Bill, the President did not apologize, or at least he didn't do so straightforwardly and without some reluctance. He did say that he had made a mistake. Will that make any difference?
I think that the White House believes that it will, Dan, and probably it will help a great deal. If we're to believe what they're telling us here, Mr. Reagan had a very difficult journey from being defensive and feeling that there was really nothing wrong with his policy to what he did tonight, saying, yes, all right, mistakes were made, and then going beyond that tonight to say it was a mistake, and it did turn out to be a trade of arms for hostages. His aides describe a cathartic process over the last week while he's read the Tower Commission report, saying that he has come to believe that the criticisms in the report are genuine and true. He's also had a lot of help. All of his best friends have been pounding on him to come out here and say that he made a mistake, even though he was determined not to apologize.
Bill, you and others have been reporting.
She didn't have a hand in writing it, but she watched the preparation of the speech very carefully. The speechwriter who worked with the president on this speech, Landon Parvin, is someone who has written extensively for the First Lady. She likes and admires his touch. So you can certainly say that her hand was in there.
Thank you very much, Bill. With us now is our congressional correspondent, Phil Jones. Phil, how do you think this speech will go over on a skeptical, or at least what has been a skeptical Capitol Hill?
Well, my view is that it will probably go a long way, but I'm not sure it will go all the way that was actually needed for the president. And probably the best answer to that question should come from one of those who's been watching it here with us at the Capitol tonight, the Senate Majority Leader, Robert Byrd. Senator Byrd, did it go far enough?
Well, it went part way, but a single speech cannot convince us of everything and cannot convince the American people to the point that that trust is fully restored. It's going to take more than speech. It's going to take actions. Actions speak louder than words.
Well, what was missing in this speech tonight?
I think the president should have recognized that it was his orders that authorized arms sales to Iran, which became the mistake. I mean, it didn't just deteriorate into that. His January 17, 1986 finding authorized the sale of arms to Iran, and one of the purposes in doing that was to secure the release of hostages. And it was also that January 17 finding that instructed the CIA not to inform the Congress.
Well, do you feel better as a result of this speech tonight?
I feel better. I think that the president has recognized, or is willing to recognize, let's put it that way, that there was a program of arms sales to Iran, and that was a mistake, and that it was to secure the release of hostages. And he is also indicating a willingness to have a new working relationship with Congress. And that is necessary. That is essential if we're going to deal with the problems that confront the country.
But do you think that he has gotten over the hump at this point? There was some talking about, can the president recover? Has he recovered?
Well, I don't think that one speech can do that job. I think he has to show by his actions that he's involved in his work, that he knows what's going on, that he knows the substance. He also needs to have a better exchange with the American people. He hasn't had a press conference now in something like 3.5 months. He needs to open up the communications to the American people. And then he needs to show by deeds that indeed he is ready to enter into this new relationship with the Congress. And Speaker Wright and I have said this from the beginning. We want that. We're ready. We're eager to get on with the president in that new relationship and dealing with the problems of the country.
Senator Robert Byrd, Democratic leader, Senate Majority Leader, thank you very much. And Dan, as you can tell, the recovery process is just the beginning as far as being here on the Hill is concerned. Dan?
Thank you, Phil. And thank you, Senator Byrd. Also with us tonight is Congressman Trent Lott of Mississippi, who is the House Republican whip. Good evening, Congressman Lott.
Good evening,
your first reaction to the president's speech is positive, I gather.
It is positive. I think he set the right tone. I thought he was honest and straightforward, contrite, if you will. He used the right words, things that he had been urged to say by Republicans and Democrats in Congress. He acknowledged that it was a mistake. He assumed full responsibility. But the best part of it was he talked about what he was doing to correct the problem at the NSC and move forward. It is just one step along the way, but I thought it was a very important one. He handled it well, and now I'm convinced that his actions will follow the words that we heard tonight.
No one doubts your support for Ronald Reagan. If you had your druthers, would you have preferred that he make a straightforward, outright apology?
You know, I hear that question being asked. Earlier the question was, will he admit that he made a mistake? I don't know that an apology would have been any better. In fact, I think maybe it would have gone too far. I think he used the right approach. I think it will hit the right chord with American people. But I also emphasize that the way to displace this problem is by actions. And I see a lot of things happening with personnel, his attitude. I was with him last night. He seems to really be getting back into the proper fighting mode, and I'm convinced he will work with the Congress. He will insist that the law be enforced to not only the spirit but the letter of the law, And there's a different mood now with Ronald Reagan. I think it'll be very positive for the next several weeks and hopefully a couple of years.
Was it your impression that Mrs. Reagan is having as much influence at the White House as some reports have indicated over the last few days?
I think that's exaggerated. I really don't think that she gets involved in policy decisions. Yes, I think she has been unhappy with personnel. I think she's been concerned about her husband. I think she should be. I don't think it goes much beyond that, though.
Thank you, Congressman Lott. Tonight, President Reagan said his Iran policy turned into an arms for hostages deal, although he emphasized that was not how he started it. He called it, quote, a mistake. He said he must now change and go forward. Those are Ronald Reagan's words. But can he turn that into action? As our chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer reports, that is what Washington, and in some ways the whole nation, are asking.
Ronald Reagan has certainly bounced back before. From illness, from an assassination attempt, from political setbacks.
The cause goes on.
But can a man change the working habits of 14 years in public life? Delegate less, and as the Tower Commission suggests,
from time to time monitor the actions of those to whom he delegates authority.
When Ronald Reagan came to the presidency, it was only the second political office he'd ever held. His management style was shaped during his first political job, California governor. California journalist Ed Saltzman remembers him then.
First thing he did was he realized that he didn't have any experience in government and needed some people with experience in government, and he brought them in. And he delegated an awful lot of authority to these people who worked under him.
It worked.
And the reason it worked probably is because running state government in California is a relatively easy job.
Where's the rest of me? It was one of the best remembered lines from his movie days, but the Tower Commission report prompted his critics to pose the same question. Where's the rest of him? Has he been only the front man who looked presidential while others ran the show? Commission member Edmund Muskie.
We were all appalled by the absence of the kind of alertness and vigilance to his job and to these policies that one expects of a president.
It was the kind of thing seldom said aloud about anyone, let alone a president, the kind of talk that can be devastating to any politician. The new chief of staff is trying to confront it head on.
I've known Ronald Reagan since 1966, and I've never seen Ronald Reagan more energetic, more fully engaged, and more in command. He's never been better.
And whatever the criticism of the president's lifelong management style, experts say it is wrong to assume someone Mr. Reagan's age can't change.
Learning doesn't stop as one gets older. And I think that the view is that he has learned something from this crisis and will adapt to it.
And in his speech tonight, the president said he had already learned from his mistakes, and he promised to keep changing until things are running right. Dan?
Bob, does this get the president out of the woods on this issue?
Well, maybe out of the woods, but he's still in some very tall grass, Dan, with more investigations in the offing, with the White House and the Congress already at odds on so many major issues. A president at the height of his political power would have very tough going, and clearly this president's clout, to say the least, is not at a high point.
Thank you, Bob Schieffer. Our coverage of President Reagan's address to the nation tonight continues in a moment.
Hey, guys, great barbecue. Yeah, plenty of Miller Lite. Have a can, Rodney.
This one's empty.
Mighty fine playing, Jim.
Wasn't me. Something tells me we're not alone in the universe. Hey, you're right, Numa. I wonder what they want. Probably our Miller Lite, because it tastes great. Let's fill it. Hey, say, look!
Oh, Mickey!
We're doomed. I'll tell you, we don't get no respect. So this is Earth, huh? Where were the girls? Wow! Well, what a pack of handsome guys!
No matter where you're from, there's only one light beer. Miller Lite.
I tell you, it's not easy being us, huh? Oh, what a crowd! What a crowd!
The latest polls indicate that President Reagan's popularity has been slipping. Substantial numbers of Americans are expressing their dissatisfaction with the president's secret arms to Iran policy, but questions about his ability to govern are not only being asked here, they're also being asked with increasing frequency overseas, among our allies and elsewhere. And it's not just the Iran-Contra affair. It is the entire Reagan policy and the Reagan style, if you will. CBS News chief European correspondent Tom Fenton has that part of tonight's story.
President Reagan's arms negotiators today presented a U.S. draft treaty to eliminate medium-range missiles in Europe. The Soviets have already agreed to the treaty in principle, if not to all the details. It's America's allies who have serious reservations about it.
Well, there's a feeling of a dual worry, that it would be, in order to regain a certain sense of popularity in the United States, either that it would be too soft vis-à-vis the Soviet Union.
President Reagan has a serious image problem in Europe. The Iran-Contra scandal is being closely watched for what it reveals about his conduct of foreign policy, and what the Europeans see they don't like. Tonight, the BBC started its newscast with a story previewing the Reagan speech.
The American people are looking to the White House tonight for more than the usual political rhapsody, which is the trademark of this president.
As President Reagan's stature diminishes, some European leaders are asking whether Europe should play a bigger role in running the alliance. At the same time, Gorbachev is gaining credibility as the leader who proposes, while Reagan only reacts.
The tendency in Europe is to be more accommodating, to take offers which come from the Soviet Union more seriously, to be more interested in arms control, reduction of tensions, and much less in any kind of confrontation with the Soviet Union.
President Reagan's biggest image problem in Europe is that Europeans no longer take him seriously. In fact, many people here never did take him seriously.
Well, the British people have always been very skeptical of Ronald Reagan, skeptical of actors being in the White House, skeptical of somebody at 76 in the White House, skeptical of people who muster their lines if they can't read them at the right times, skeptical particularly of presidents who can't recall conversations or whether they sold arms or did not sell arms or authorized such a sale. I think none of this has come as a great surprise.
Most Europeans were asleep when the president spoke tonight. They'll read about it tomorrow, but it's not likely to change many minds. The arms treaty proposed here in Geneva is one of the most significant steps in arms control in years. But in the European mind, it is overshadowed and rendered suspect by what also happened here, Iran-Contra money coming and going through secret bank accounts. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Geneva.
As Tom Fenton pointed out, there's some talk in Europe, there's some talk here of the Ronald Reagan presidency, for all intents and purposes, being over. It was clear tonight that Ronald Reagan himself wants to reverse that kind of talk. He is by no means ready to write his presidency off. He still has 22 months remaining in office, less than 2 years to go. Tonight, Mr. Reagan tried to signal a new start. A new administration team is taking shape. Action has been taken. A new arms policy is being negotiated with the Soviets. Said President Reagan tonight, and this is a direct quote, "You pull your energies together, you change, you go forward." The story, of course, does not end here. There are more investigations to come, 2 investigations in the United States Congress, more revelations to come perhaps, and perhaps more speeches like the one we've seen and heard tonight. There'll be more coverage of this on your late local news and, of course, on CBS News Night Watch, CBS Morning News, and on the CBS Evening News tomorrow night. Until then, Dan Rather, good night.
The President's Plan has been a special report from CBS News. This is CBS.